Yo, what's going on, E7 fam? Pat here, back with another how to play video guide. And in this one, we'll be talking about the lady who copped Krau's style, Yulha. As with all of my how to play videos, I'll be going super in depth and it'll cover most of the staple things you've come to expect from me in guide form. Things like stats, possible endgame equipment builds to try out, voice actor trivia, and even matchup knowledge if that is your thing. If you do enjoy the video, as always, please consider leaving it a like. And if you really enjoyed my content, please consider subscribing to my channel. It does help me out here a ton. As always, with the introduction out of the way, let's get it started by talking about Yulha's stats. Yulha is an Earth Knight of the Sagittarius zodiac symbol. She shares a stat line with Ambitious Tywin, as well as Fallen Cecilia. Taking a look at her stats, she has 894 attack, 694 defense, 6,840 health, 104 base speed, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, no starting effectiveness or effect resistance, and 3% dual attack chance. The attack and speed are below average when compared to other 5 stars at Epic 7, and the defense and health are above average for 5 stars at Epic 7, but when you consider other warriors or other potential knights, it's not exactly the highest. It is a working stat line for a tank, but it is not exactly the best. As a bit of trivia before moving on to the skill section, in the Japanese dub of Epic 7, Yulha is voiced by Tomoyo Kurosawa, who you may recognize as Amiya from Arknights, Sothis from Fire Emblem Three Houses, or Rebecca from last year's smash hit Cyberpunk Edgerunners. In the English dub of Epic 7, however, Yulha is voiced by one of my personal favorite voiceover artists of all time in Lara Post. You can hear her as Fubuki in One Punch Man, Isabella in The Promised Neverland, Mai Zenin from Jujutsu Kaisen, but for most of you watching this video, she is probably going to be best known as the mage mid laner from League of Legends, Ahri. One of my favorite things about Lara is her playful delivery while still being very, very sassy in a lot of her roles, and she does that beautifully here in Epic 7 as Yulha, as evidenced by her amazing win quote.
Don't let every trivial thing surprise you. It makes you look incompetent. I'm going to end you.
Yulha's S1 is Cruel Touch. It has a 0.5x attack multiplier as well as a 10% health multiplier. It has an 85 to 100% chance, depending on Molagora, to inflict Redirected Provoke on the target for 1 turn.
What's this? Another insect to squash.
Redirected Provoke on this S1 is, in my opinion, pretty much strictly better than Provoke is on most other knights. Yulha, because she is a tank, is almost assuredly going to have the highest max health on your team, which means that the inflicted target will almost always be coming at Yulha, which synergizes incredibly well with her S2 passive that we'll be talking about next. However, there are edge cases where the redirected provoked character might not attack Yulha, which might save her and synergizes incredibly well with her S3 that we'll also be talking about later on in this section. Yulha's S2 passive is Malicious Smile. When Yulha is attacked by a single target attack, she will reflect 30% of the damage she suffers back to her attacker. The reflected damage cannot be higher than the attacker's maximum health. I can only assume this clause is here for PvE reasons because it might potentially make current or future Abyss floors very easy, and this is basically the designers covering for themselves, making sure that that is not the case. Regardless, whether it is a single target attack or an AoE attack, when an attack lands on Yulha and she has 30% or less of her maximum health, she will dispel all debuffs from herself and activate Murderous Intent. Murderous Intent is a non-attack skill that can only be activated once every 5 turns. Murderous Intent increases Yulha's combat readiness by 20 to 25% depending on Molagora and grants her a barrier for 3 turns. The barrier strength on this is proportional to 35% of her maximum health. Wow, what a passive for a tank to actually have. Anything that comes her way, she will reflect 30% of that damage back, and considering the S1 Cruel Touch is a redirected provoke, they almost assuredly are going to attack Yulha and receive some damage. This is very, very potent on characters with low maximum base health. That's really, I think, where Yulha shines against a lot of these low health, high damage characters, especially dodge-based ones, because if they try to hit her, they're going to be taking a decent chunk of damage back. And then the S3, which we'll talk about in a second, is also just amazing against those low health style characters as well. On top of that, she has a full cleanse on her S2 when she gets low on health, which is super, super useful. If you ever wanted to forego effect resistance on a tank, or you simply do not have it, Yulha is one of the better options to do so because of this full cleanse. I personally would still play some form of effect resistance, but again, the cleanse on here does allow you to forego that. So if you want to choose something like more speed, more bulk, or even something like effectiveness on this character, again, this portion of the passive will allow you to forego that. On top of that, the combat readiness boost as well as the barrier does allow her to kind of cut in front of specific enemies and try to hang in there a little bit longer so she could finally land her signature skill, Symphony of Agony, which we'll be talking about now. Symphony of Agony, as I just said, is the signature skill on this character, despite the fact that it shares a number of similarities to Krau's S3, Summon Siegfried. We will be comparing both of these skills off and on throughout this actual section here. You acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 5 to 6 turn cooldown depending on Molagora. It is a single target attack with a 0.5x attack multiplier. Additionally, it gains 0.31 damage for every 1 HP that Yulha is missing. When the target is not an elite or boss monster, damage sharing effects are ignored. This move has a 100% defense penetration rate similar to Summon Siegfried, and just like that move, it also cannot trigger a critical hit. On top of that, if Symphony of Agony secures a kill, it will heal Yulha for 40% of her maximum HP.
Scream for me. I love listening to the melodies of pain. It's never a good idea to get in my way.
Symphony of Agony is the payoff skill for your tank. Again, it is very similar to Summon Siegfried. You are using Yulha to provoke enemies to get them to go into her to protect your allies. And you're wearing the Aureus artifact on her to soak up damage, again, protecting your allies. Once your tank is about to bite the dust because her health is very, very low, you use Symphony of Agony to pick off a problematic character or a straggler with very low health. Unlike Krau, Symphony of Agony here on Yulha heals if she secures a kill shot, and it ignores damage share, which means that it is better into compositions that are also trying to tank down. So if you're going into a bruiser versus bruiser match, Yulha will have the edge most of the time when it comes to these longer drawn out fights. Now, if we look at Summon Siegfried's multipliers, that is a 0.3x attack multiplier, and it gets 0.54 damage for every 1 HP that Krau is missing. So, as you could tell, Summon Siegfried does have a bit more damage than Symphony of Agony. As a general rule of thumb, when I am playing, I like to approximate Krau's Siegfried damage as roughly slightly more than he has missing HP. To give you an example, a 25k HP max health Krau with 5,000 health remaining, that's roughly 20,000 of his health missing, I can expect to do somewhere around 20 to 21,000 damage, assuming that there is no damage share on the enemy team. If there is, then it's probably going to be a little bit less. Yulha's damage is roughly 85% of the difference in her maximum health versus her remaining health. So to reuse our example with Krau that we just had, if we take a 25,000 health maximum Yulha and she is at 5,000 health remaining, you're not going to get 20 to 21,000 damage like you would with Krau. Realistically, it's going to do a little bit more than 17,000 damage, which is about 85% of what you would get with Krau. While it might take you a second longer to calculate that number in your head than Krau's, it is a much more reliable kill, again, because it ignores damage share. You're basically almost always going to be getting the same amount with Yulha. You should, if you are playing Yulha a lot, get into the habit of approximating the damage that Symphony of Agony will deal to a target. You want to make sure, more than anything, that Symphony of Agony lands a kill shot. Miscalculating this will cost you games for sure. Yulha's Soulburn is the same as Krau's Soulburn. You take an extra turn on her S3 Symphony of Agony for the cost of 20 souls. For when it absolutely has to die, this is what the Soulburn is for. You use S3 if you fail to secure a kill, take an extra turn, use S1 Cruel Touch, and hopefully pick off the straggler. Doesn't always come up, isn't always useful, but sometimes it is important and can save the game. When it comes to Molagora priorities, you want to max the S3 Symphony of Agony first. This is the primary reason you are choosing Yulha over any other tank in this game. You want that single target nuke. You want to make sure that it secures the kill, so you want the damage to be as high as possible. After that, invest in Cruel Touch to +4 for the effect chance to get the 100% chance redirected provoke. And then after that, you can either max out Cruel Touch or invest in Malicious Smile. All you get in investing Malicious Smile is extra combat readiness, which can help you and can win you a game, but I don't think it is as important as the damage on Symphony of Agony or the effect chance of Cruel Touch. If you only sometimes play tanks, you're going to want to have Symphony at +5 and Cruel Touch at +4 at the minimum. But if you are a true turn 2 player, a bruiser player through and through, I definitely think Yulha is one that you want to invest into to +15. Yulha is a tank, and as such, she is a fairly straightforward to build character. The big things that differentiate the builds in this section are going to be the main set that you choose to use and how that changes Yulha's gameplay style, as well as the 4th substat that you choose to use on all of your actual gear. Obviously, as a tank, you're going to want to have health and defense, and then possibly also speed because, you know, most characters in Epic 7 really want speed. It is the best stat in the game, after all. So yeah, that 4th stat, that's going to be entirely up to you. Taking a look at our very first set here on Yulha, it will be a speed set variant. My primary sets here are going to be speed, main set, and immunity offset. I only chose immunity offset because it doesn't require me to change too much math on the slide. If you want immunity on this character, you can absolutely go for it. For most people who are trying to min-max the stats, you could choose either defense, health, resist, or even hit set. That depends, again, entirely on you. The biggest draw to the speed set is that most of you watching this video probably have the gear to make the speed set actually work. This is the easiest version of Yulha to gear and to get very high stats because the speed set gives the second most amount of raw stats in the entire game. So if you are a stat-focused player, you're probably going to want to be going with the speed set variant. Looking at our desired stats, we have 1,510 attack. This is simply Yulha's base attack with an I-90 weapon, as well as the recommended artifact, which is Aureus. Aureus is super good on this character. I recommend it on every single build. It is pretty much the best tank artifact in the game, and if you just for some reason cannot land those provokes on Cruel Touch, or the enemy decides to ignore Yulha entirely, the damage share from Aureus will eventually get Yulha's health low enough for her to use Symphony of Agony. For defense, I have 1,600, and health, I have 28k. Although, you can absolutely go lower and go for 1,500 defense and 26k health if you are a newer player. That's probably the lowest I would go on Yulha. For those of you who are on Fribbles, the 1,600 defense, 28k HP is roughly around 180k effective health. If you can go higher than this, I highly recommend you do so. The bulkier, the tankier you make Yulha, the stronger she is going to be, the more powerful Symphony of Agony is going to be when you decide to leverage it. I have in the past played 1,700 defense and 30k to 31k HP, and it has been fantastic for me when I was on the speed set. Again, the tankier you can get this character, the better it is going to feel when you actually play her. For speed, I have 200, although this is misleading. This is simply the average speed number that I have gathered from all of the Yulhas I've seen throughout my research for this video. You don't really necessarily need 200. If you can only get 190, 180, or even 170, that is probably fine. Having a high HP and defense total in order for Yulha to soak damage through Aureus is more important than her speed value. Symphony of Agony cannot critically strike, so we will not invest in a critical hit chance or critical hit damage in any of these builds. Now you'll notice here for effectiveness and effect resistance, I have 0 to 100%. What you value in Yulha depends entirely on what you actually are going to be getting in this section. If you want a speed Yulha that has some degree of control, choose effectiveness. If you don't want Yulha to get either slept, stunned, slowed, things like that, choose effect resistance. Do remember that the S2 component, Murderous Intent, has a cleanse built into it, so you may not actually value the effect resistance that high. I still have chosen to go for effect resistance in my builds, but that's because I don't want my tank to be debuffed whenever possible, so that way I can kind of use her turns effectively and get more provokes off in a match. You, again, may feel differently. You may feel having more HP and defense is better. You may also feel having the ability to provoke knights or tanks or even soul weavers, supports, whatever you want. You may feel that that is more important to you. So I leave that to you, and it's going to be like that for most of these sets that we talk about in this section. Taking a look at the right side build, everything from the necklace down to the boots, I recommend health, because the higher you can get the health, the better Symphony of Agony is going to be. You could, of course, use defense percentage necklaces, rings. You can use ER rings. You can use effectiveness rings. Whatever you want, just make sure they have sky-high health to offset the fact that you're losing that 65% health at each of these slots. This is one of the few characters where health percentage boots actually will make the math a bit easier for you, because speed isn't as important on Yulha as it is on other characters. You don't really need to stress too high about having really fast speed. If you decide to go with speed main stat boots, you don't really need any speed at all on your pieces. You're just going to need over 30% health most of the time. So again, I leave that to you. If you have like 30+% health gear just laying around, by all means, go for the speed boots. But for those of you who only have about 20 or so percentage health per piece average, I recommend going for some nice health percentage boots. Artifact is Aureus for the reasons we already discussed. But I do have Holy Sacrifice here if you decide to play Yulha on Arena Defense or Guild War Defense. It's really, really good at surprising enemies and kind of making sure that when Yulha dies, she revives at low health, can then use Symphony of Agony and pick off a specific straggler, which could help you secure an Arena Defense, or you could potentially pick off a key character and help your guild secure a win for Guild Wars. Looking at the per piece average here, I have 17% defense, 20% health, 11 speed, and then you'll notice I have flat health, ER, or effectiveness. Which one you choose, again, depends entirely on what you actually value. These next two builds are going to go by incredibly fast because they are 95% the same as the speed set build. The next one we're going to be talking about is a revenge set variant. It is going to be on revenge immunity for the same reasons we talked about last time. If you choose to go for a different offset based on what you want the character to do, that is fine. The primary reason to use the revenge set is because it has incredible synergy with Yulha's game plan. She wants to get low on health in order to use Symphony of Agony, right? So when you're low on health, the revenge set starts to outpace the speed set in terms of value. This is basically the optimal way to play a fast Yulha. The problem is that most people who play Epic 7 have farmed far more Wyvern in their careers than Katie's, and as such, they most likely have better speed gear than they do revenge gear. But on paper, the revenge set should be probably the optimal way to play a faster Yulha. So if you want to try to chase that optimal variant of the character, you want the set with the most amount of synergy on the character, choose the revenge set. Taking a look at the desired stats, everything is exactly the same for the same reasons as the previous section. The speed here is 180. This is essentially what you would get with the speed build, just adjusted for the revenge set build, because instead of having plus 25% speed, you're only getting plus 12% speed. As you get lower on health, again, this base speed is essentially going to be much higher. When we take a look at the right side, you'll see that basically nothing here has changed at all. The per piece average is pretty much exactly the same as well at 17% defense, 20% health, 11 speed, and then your choice again of either health, effect resistance, or effectiveness. The final build to talk about in the video is the counter set variant. This one has a bit of a different feel than the speed or the revenge Yulha. Essentially, you're going to reverse provoke a specific target with Cruel Touch. They will attack Yulha. If you proc counter set and actually keep them provoke locked, it will function very similar to a mini Senya in some ways, and therefore Yulha on her turn can then provoke a different character and lock down potentially two characters, which will get her life total very, very low and have a very controlling presence on the battlefield. I think that this build is incredibly fun. It's not necessarily better or, for that case, worse than either of the other builds. It's just a playstyle preference and what you actually want to get out of the character. When we take a look at the primary sets here, we have counter set with immunity, just like we have very similar to speed and revenge set of the previous two sections. Offsets are going to be all the same. Again, I cannot really choose one for you. It depends entirely on you. Taking a look at the desired stats, the speed here is 170, but you can go as low as 160 if you so choose. I do recommend going for a bit more effectiveness. If you were going to play a build for effectiveness, you wanted a more controlling Yulha, I think that this one is a bit better than the speed and the revenge ones if you want to dump extra stats into effectiveness. Again, this one is a bit more controlling and honestly a whole lot of fun compared to the other ones that I have played, which is why I'm currently on it. Taking a look at the right side, everything is exactly the same as the previous two builds. And when you look at the per piece average, it's exactly the same yet again at 17% defense, 20% health, 11 speed, and then your choice of health, effect resistance, or effectiveness. If you decide to pump up the stats, as always, you are more than welcome to do so. If you can get that like 16 or 1700 defense with 29 to 30k HP, I encourage you to do so. As always, let's finish this video up with some matchup knowledge. Yulha's biggest differentiator between her peers is going to be that skill 3, Symphony of Agony, so you want to be playing her in matches where she can really leverage that. One of the ways we can do that is bringing her into dodge-based characters like Savior Auden. Traditionally, dodge-based characters do not have high maximum health. Only really Green Violet might have a ton of maximum health, so when Yulha is low on life and targets them with Symphony, there is a very high chance, even through a miss, that these characters are going to die in one hit. She's also super good against big AoE burst, especially if she's wearing the Aureus artifact. She will soak up a portion of all that AoE damage, get low on health very easily, and then can pick off a specific character on the enemy team very easily. Characters like Lionheart Sermia are perfect examples of this. She has a huge AoE attack in I Am the Victor, but not a lot of base health. So if she uses that skill very early and your team somehow survives, you could very easily pick off Lionheart Sermia with Symphony. And again, that could potentially win the game if Lionheart is the only real threat on the team. Lastly, I want to highlight the fact that Yulha, at least for me, has been amazing in Guild War offense because there are a lot of blue-based characters on the enemy team that cannot really do a ton of damage to Yulha, and there's still a lot of AoE damage dealers as well, which will, again, get her really low on life and allow you to spam that Symphony early and often. As for bad matchups, things you want to avoid bringing Yulha into, she's a tank, so the standard things you'd be afraid to play a tank into do apply here. Tank busters like Straze or Laika. Big health-based character like Yulha also really doesn't want to play against injury-based characters because then your Symphony of Agony has no real value. Also, Yulha can function as a carry from the tank slot, and she is advantaged, I feel like, versus most traditional tanks, but there are some control tanks like Unbound Knight Arwell, for example, that can kind of stun lock her, control her, and not allow you to get Symphony off in the times that you need it, which could cost you the game. It's really important you kind of understand the differences between your tank versus your opponent's tank in standard versus standard or bruiser versus bruiser matchups, because that will be one of the major keys to success. Finally, for characters that we want to pair Yulha with, she's a tank, which signifies a standard playstyle, which means the standard fare that you're used to seeing will apply here. A lot of supports, characters like Destina, Maid Chloe, Mediator Koeric, these are going to support Yulha, prop her up, allow her to be that strong shield and that damage redirect that your team needs to allow your hard carries to actually do their job. Also, because you are playing a mitigation source in Yulha, she's amazing with other essentially anti-aggression, anti-cleave style characters. It's very easily to pivot into a draft with something like Karina and Sanya on your team with Yulha, which will make it very difficult for your opponent to play an aggressive strategy. And that's going to do it for how to play Yulha. And now that you know how to play Yulha, you can kind of take this information, if you think about it, and play Blue Crow. He's pretty much almost identical to Yulha here. So if you have the know-how, you understand how this character works, you definitely understand now how Blue Crow works, although he does have slightly less base health, so don't expect to go as high, maybe 26, 27k, if you can actually swing it. But yeah, just wanted to point that out. If I did miss anything on Yulha, please let me know down in the comments below. Would love to hear from you guys and girls out there, any and all comments. If you want to see more how to play guides in this same style, there should be a playlist on your screen now. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye. Bye bye now.